yes, China, it's the Middle Kingdom. So everything is always going to be more domestic than outside looking. And in that sense, it's not just a question to me, these are my personal opinions, of whether it's 80-20 or 90-10 or 70-30. It's more a question of time sequence. Professor Price has observed there was the period of before the games and during the games. Well, before the games, in my view, in the Chinese view, the games definitely were the great domestic mobilization that Wen talked about at Davos. And not the first great domestic mobilization. This is a pattern in the People's Republic from its founding. There is an understandable concern, not only through Chinese leadership, but through the Chinese population, about the effects of centrifugal forces on Chinese society, about the problems of divisiveness, about the problems that have affected the people of China historically when the country is facing serious divisions. And great mobilizations are a treatment for that have been brought to bear over and over, sometimes to serious ill effect, other times much more benign. In fact, you can look even among the most recent such mobilizations, the ones after '89, you have the mobilization in a sense with the typical countdown clock to the return of Hong Kong, and then followed immediately with a countdown clock to the return of Macau. And then not so long after that, this benign 7 years or so of counting down to the Olympics. This is a sort of pharaonic, pyramid-like effort to bring a national sense of a goal and an objective and make sure it all hangs together. Now, there's a domestic, inward-looking purpose. Naturally, it wouldn't go away and didn't go away when the games began. But what happens when the games began, what happened when the games began, is you bring to bear something else. The Olympics are the world's great branding mechanism. That peering eye, everyone in the world watching on TV, all the reporters congregating, more reporters than athletes, I think, pretty sure. This focus on your country for over 2 weeks, there's no other way to get it. This is why people bid for the games. This is what they want. So when this begins, it's not just the opening ceremonies, though they're a classic example of it, maybe the strongest example, but the whole enchilada is something under the Klieg light of world view. So you can't sit there and say, I'm still focused domestically exclusively. You have to be thinking about what the world thinks. Yes, the preparation for that may have been less than we outside have thought. I had the pleasure of taking Mayor Villaraigosa to see the Olympic venues under construction about 1.5 years before the Games. We were the first foreigners into the bird's nest after they pulled away the struts and held their breath and saw that it didn't collapse. But in dealing, as was remarked before the lunch, in dealing with BOCOG, it was impossible. The '84 Olympic Organizing Committee that I was very involved with, when we had foreign people coming, we sent people to the airport. We had 2 flags on the table. We were ready. There was a whole division of people for entertaining foreigners. Well, that didn't exist at BOCOG. You couldn't get them to answer your calls, even though I had the U.S. Olympic Committee doing it with me. Right before the Games, the White House security contingent, the Secret Service, couldn't get BOCOG to answer their calls until there was an intervention by the U.S. Olympic Committee at the highest levels. So BOCOG was disorganized in a sense in the ways that we're talking about, not in other ways, highly siloed, not coherent, hard to get their attention if you were foreign. But make no mistake, once the Games began, there was no failure to notice that the world was watching, and it was a public diplomacy project. I mean, we've got, what does it say here? The question is, public diplomacy triumph or public relations spectacle? Well, I don't know if there's a difference, but I think it clearly was a public diplomacy triumph. And if you look at the objectives, and some of them were laid out by speakers this morning, the main ones were the usual sort of taglines, the emotional concepts put forth by Hu Jintao and others of harmonious society, peaceful rise, also modernity. We're modern and ready for the world. These ideas were ideas that wanted to be put out there. Now, they're brands. The Olympics are this great branding mechanism. And in the bad old days, we used to call these the party line. Well, call it what you want. They're a way of mobilizing people around ideas and that's public diplomacy. That's what they were up to, and they clearly got there. However, other things got there too, and that's sort of what's interesting about them. And if you were there in person, you could see it even more. Now, maybe that doesn't matter. Frankly, as far as the Olympics are concerned, the big audience is the members of the International Olympic Committee, the 115 of those. Then there's the TV and the print journalists, and they are important, and games are organized around them. Competitions are set at certain times to capture TV. And then third, there's the athletes. And then fourth, way down there, is the in-person spectators, the category that I was in this time. To be avoided if you're going. Try to get yourself in a higher category. Try out for a team. You know, better than that, try out for being a TV journalist. But even at the TV level, you could see some of what else was being shown, which was the underlying authoritarianism that could bring it to bear. Maybe it's essential in putting on a great Olympics. For all we say about Jesse Owens and you know, thumbing his nose at Hitler, the fact is the 36 games were very well run and did what the IOC wanted, and frankly did what Hitler wanted. I'm not saying that there was Hitler in Beijing. I'm just saying that a central authoritarian government puts this event on better than anyone else can, and China did. But when they do it so well, you can't avoid noticing that underneath the velvet glove is some pretty steely hands, or else how does it get done so well? Now, you could see it in the opening ceremonies. There was a sense in which the opening ceremonies and so many other aspects of the games were simply taking all that had been done before to an extreme, sort of the earlier Olympics on steroids. So we had 84 pianists playing Gershwin in the '84 Olympics. They had 8,000 drummers. It made the Londoners sit there before the economic collapse saying, what the hell are we going to do? And they were literally saying that. But when you watch those drummers, you saw it, and Professor Lynch mentioned it, Professor Wang mentioned it and showed you those South Park excerpts. The message could not be avoided, that there's an intimidation factor. Now, in one sense, if this came through while we were trying to throw a party here at SC and show it as a joyous event, and then it came looking a little intimidating, we'd say we screwed up. I'll leave to you that question. Probably they didn't screw up. They may not have intended to do it so exceedingly well, but they had this top-level message, the joyous celebration, and then this message sort of behind the curtains that you couldn't miss, a subtext of, you know, it's all wonderful, but if it's not the way we want, we also have this. If I were even slightly Machiavellian, I would want to achieve that exact public diplomacy effect. So you have to question whether they wanted to. If I wanted to, I couldn't have done it better. And it wasn't only in the opening ceremonies. It was in other ways that you could sometimes see on TV, but not too much. Most of the journalists there are sportscasters. As soon as the games begin, the focus turns, as it should, to the athletes. They're not, the sportscasters, very astute at seeing these things. Most of them won't have been to China at all before. And I was driving in from the airport, or riding in from the airport, happily. The taxi driver was driving. And I saw there were no clothes hanging from anybody's window to dry. I knew the fix was in. The word had gone out. You're going to do what you're told. And each and every one of those taxis was brand new, and each and every one of them had a microphone on the dashboard. I don't know if anyone was listening, but they could, and maybe they were. There was a saturation of state security. Those drummers were all PLA. That was mentioned on TV. They were all smiling because they were told to. They weren't smiling in the rehearsal. They were said, you better smile, so they smiled. There's something sort of spooky about that. 8,000 smiling soldiers. But also, the ushers weren't always ushers. This famous army of volunteers, a goodly percentage were state security. A microphone in the ear, a little wire. They didn't know where the seats were. They were busy turning, watching the crowd. Should a banner open up? And it didn't open up. There were other efforts to clean up the place. If you're having guests to your place, of course you're going to clean it up. I don't hold that against anyone. I don't hold any of this against them. They're doing it the way they wanted to do it, and it worked. But every building under construction wasn't completed was covered with sheeting and banners. Every empty lot covered with billboards of Olympic themes. Great. The flowers everywhere. All terrific to show a good face. But at the same time, anybody who was a vagrant or otherwise unpleasant off the streets and sent anywhere. Yes, we were asked, how do you respond to demonstrations? Asked only in the last 2 months, when to their astonishment, the torch relay was greeted with less than joy everywhere. And everybody recommended to them demonstration sites. And they created 3 demonstration sites, as was observed, in the boondocks. And anyone, including 2 elderly ladies, wanted to protest their rent, who rose to say that, met some kind of fate. These 2 were house arrest. It goes back to an old Maoist saying about the snakes crawling out from under the rocks. Certain habits don't die, and some of it was noticed, but not that much. As to what wasn't going to be on TV, there was much less concern. So if you're an in-person spectator, you'd see more of this than you saw on TV. What was on TV was, by all measures, I think, a great success. The nationalism of the Chinese was shown on TV, a gold count. Even today, you heard a count of medals that was only the golds. Why? Because the total medal count, the Americans won. So they kept forgetting the total medal count. One time on the loudspeaker in some event I was at, they announced the medal count to date, and they gave the Chinese gold and then the Chinese total, and then the American gold, and then the German gold and the German total. Really? So if you went into the US-Nigerian soccer game, the ushers were handing out Nigerian flags to everybody who came in. Nigerians did beat us. But this entire Chinese crowd waving Nigerian flags. So the nationalism also may be a lingering part of the great national effort. The nationalism was there. Some of it was seen on TV. And in some ways, it enhanced the TV audience. So these things work in 2 different ways. And from the point of view of the IOC, let me show you a slide that Gilbert Philly, who is executive director of the IOC, showed me. Wait a minute, I'm losing it. I can't do this very well. Lisa left me. Now, how do I get the... It disappeared. It's a touchpad. Oh, there it is. Maybe you can help me still if you're coming. Thanks. There it is. I'll need the second one next time. You can do it. Yeah. The IOC, not just BOCOG, did a poll before and after the games. They don't tell you how far before, probably during the torch relay, so it minimized the pro-Chinese view. And I know immediately after, because I saw this in the first week of October, and opinions about the games and how they saw improvement. Please, and it's just as favorable or unfavorable. So everybody in the room knows there's all sorts of defects in this. It's just too general. We don't know the timing, et cetera. But you can see how thrilled the IOC is that it shows that the games boost a national reputation, not a city reputation, incidentally. And the games are always supposed to belong to a city. The IOC signed right on. Let it be a national reputation, except not too much in Japan about the games, but a little bit there. And then the next one, they then asked the next question, which is the views on China, and which is opinions of China, not of the games, improved in all countries but Japan and Germany over the same time, and the views toward, then they went in to put an excuse for the Olympics. Our initial research, views toward China shaped views toward the games. So if the games aren't really popular, it's not our fault, it's the Chinese fault. But this is something the IOC is selling and selling hard, that the games are a branding mechanism. They want you to see it that way. They want you to see that as part of a large part of their purpose and to encourage people to come. And the question that was raised is, does it have a lasting effect? Same classic question for public diplomacy. My personal view is all such things have a much bigger effect permanently or in the short run when you have an event that writes its story on a blank slate. Barcelona, enormously positive effect for Barcelona, but it comes on an almost blank opinion page in most people's minds, no views of Barcelona. If you come in and try to do something to build the image of the US or China, you're coming in on a well-written page, all you're ever going to get is a bump. So you can see some of these bumps. The Japanese are not going to be persuaded after their experiences. You know, they have opinions going in, they have opinions coming out, slight improvement. Other places who have less opinion, you see big improvement. The other thing is that I believe such events, including the Olympics, which is the biggest of them, and FIFA's World Cup comes in second, give you an ephemeral boost at most, except when it's on a trend line. meaning if what it's doing is reinforcing a trend line. So Japan is up and coming. They have the 64 games just at the right moment. It kicks them up faster. Big impact. Barcelona similarly. Coming up, city emerging, kicks them up. Big impact. Seoul, not big impact. Atlanta, no impact. It wasn't on a rise. It didn't kick them up. And it can't prevent a fall. It's similar to the idea of living the brand. If you're living the brand, if it's saying about you what people will think about you anyway, it'll make them think it faster and harder. And then lastly, did it meet the IOC goals? You bet. Home run. It reinvigorated their dying brand among the 18 to 34-year-old males. And that was hurting them badly because of losing sponsorships. They were falling off a cliff. The Turin Games were awful for them. 10th in US TV ratings among that group. Their TV ratings worldwide went way off the scale. Great, because they're about to go into a whole new cycle of TV negotiations. So that's terrific for them. And then the nationalistic rivalry, which is contrary to the Coubertin spirit of the Olympics, they embraced it. Absolutely. The Olympics have been badly hurt in terms of ratings and money and all that by the end of the Cold War nationalistic conflict between the US and Russia for medals. The Chinese went right outside. They said had project, what was it, Project 119 to get 119 medals? Well, they fell short. But still, this thing I told you about the Nigeria game, the IOC loved it. And even though they love it, even though it's not what it's all about. So that brings me to what I'm really up here to do, which is introduce a couple people who are what it's all about. Because when I look to my own experience with the Olympics, it goes back to 1979, I've asked myself often, why am I involved with this? The people who run it are among them some wonderful people. Generous, concerned about the world in which they live, concerned about athletes. But a lot of them aren't. A lot of them are too old, shouldn't be doing it anymore, don't have the right perspective and aren't doing it for the right reasons. The TV people and the sponsors, it's business. The Olympics and what draws me to it has always been the athletes. Almost to a man and woman, though not quite to a man and woman, but almost to a man and woman. These are among the most admirable people on the earth today. And as you watched our athletes this past summer be so gracious, almost to a man and woman, in both victory and defeat, you see why I say this. And then I think about the friends I've made doing all this who are athletes or have been athletes, that is to say they are Olympians, once an Olympian, always an Olympian, and I realize that they are among the people whose friendship I value the most. And I have two of them here today who I'd like to introduce to you and have them talk. So I'm talking about Janet Evans and Larson Jensen, both Trojan USC graduates, both incredible swimmers. Janet will speak first, and Janet is an amazing person. 1989 recipient of the Sullivan Award. That alone is enough to, if I'd say that about anyone, but also 4 world records, freestyle swimming, 3 of which stood for between 18 and 20 years. Realize how amazing that is? It's truly astonishing. I mean, at the end of her career, she held 6 US records, 3 world records, 5 Olympic medals, including 4 gold, and 45 US national titles. And she's Sydney's mom. And my friend. So let's ask Janet to come and talk to you.